customer obsession so that they can grow. Now, the overarching theme for our predictions in 2018 was that 2018 will be a year of reckoning. And I've included the definition of what reckoning is. And it's defined as the time when one is called to account for one's actions, to pay one's debts, or to fulfill one's promises or obligations. And you'll be sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? Global stock markets are at an all-time high. GDP growth rates have recovered to a level they haven't since the Great Recession. Unemployment is very low. Corporate earnings are excellent. What is it that is so concerning about the year to come? Let me share with you 4 key trends that we think are going to challenge companies. There's a very famous quote from Warren Buffett. He says, "You never know who's been swimming naked until the tide goes out." And we think in 2018 we'll figure out a little bit more clearly who's been swimming naked. So let me explain to you why that is. At Forrester, we measure customer experience. We have an offering called the Customer Experience Index, which tells us how companies are doing from a customer experience perspective. We've been doing this for about a decade. We track 1,000 brands around the world. And this is showing you some data from Australia. And the driver here is one of the elements we see happening is that unmet customer expectations are resulting in churn. This data is showing a comparison of the customer experience index scores for Australia from 2017 compared to 2016. Now keep in mind that in Australia, the familiarity with CX is at an all-time high. There's been millions and millions of dollars invested in CX. The competency and capability for CX is higher than it's ever been. In spite of all of that progress, CX index scores in Australia haven't moved. In fact, they've gotten a little bit worse. So there's a disconnect here, right? If there's all this investment and all of this focus, why is it that they're not moving? We've seen this in a lot of developed markets like Singapore and the US. CX progress is stuck, basically. Our colleagues in the States say CX has hit a wall. The reason for this is that if you look at this equation, we're trying to understand how customer experience performance is working out. You have the experience that you can provide as an organization over the expectation, which equals the perceived value. And of course, we know that customer expectations are rising very, very fast. If you stand still, you will fall behind. Even if you run very fast, in some cases, you are just holding steady. So in many ways, companies are running to stand still, and the perceived value is dropping if they're not moving very quickly. So this is one of the challenges we see companies facing. Another is that lack of digital transformation is leading to a loss in market share. Christmas is just around the corner. Those of you with kids may be going to Toys R Us. Sadly, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy in September of this year. Fortunately, they have over $3 billion in bankruptcy financing. But they've been losing market share. And they've been losing market share because e-commerce players like Amazon have been taking business away from them to the point where their business model just no longer works. Here in Singapore, another institution is Mustafa. Mustafa's in a 24-hour shopping center. For the first time ever, in January of this year, they reduced their floor space. They cut about a quarter of their retail floor space here in Singapore. They closed down their Serengeti Plaza branch. And their positioning has always been great availability, very low prices, and we're open 24 hours. So what does that sound like to you? That sounds like a Alibaba or Lazada or a Tmall. They just can't compete. They haven't transformed themselves digitally, so they're losing market share. A third trend is that industry lines which used to protect firms, they're now crumbling. This is a picture of some of the industry migrations, let's call them, from Alibaba. If I put up a slide for Amazon, it would look the exact same. So they started, of course, on the commerce side. They moved into mobile media and entertainment, local services. You have logistics, payment and financial services. Fred will later talk about their movement into healthcare. So these lines that companies thought protected them by industry are crumbling. And one of my favorite examples here is space travel. Who would have thought that SpaceX and Blue Origin could compete with NASA and the US military-industrial complex? But that is really now the driving force of innovation in that space. In the past, we would have said this is impossible. There just isn't the capital available for them to do that. But that's very much what's happening. And then finally, durable business models are failing. GE was founded in 1892. In fact, the original Dow Jones Index, this is the only company that remains on the Dow Index. Their stock this year is down 43%. They've changed CEOs. They have put out a new transformation plan, and they're struggling. Now, this is a company that has been through both world wars, the Great Depression, every recession the world has seen in the last 125 years. They've been enormously successful. Their model has been very resilient, but it's not working with the way the world is changing. Another example would be Singapore Airlines. Here in Singapore, we love Singapore Airlines, a great airline. It's been a shining star of the airlines around the world for years. In their Q4 of this year, they reported a loss. I think they lost $238 million. The latest quarter, they did post a profit, but it was down quite a bit from the prior year. And if you see the quote here, they are also looking at how to transform. This business model that they've employed it's just not working the way that it once worked. Incidentally, the same quarter that they announced a loss, Cathay Pacific did the same. So these are these four key driving forces that we think are indicating some concerns for the year to come. Now we're going to focus our predictions in three key categories. We'll have the analysts share their predictions for each, and then we'll have Q&A, and then we'll move on to the next. So we have three key themes: the digital crisis, the empowered machine, and the evolving nature of trust. On the digital crisis, a recent survey we did showed that 60% of global CEOs feel they are behind on their digital transformation. And what we know is that digital transformation requires will, leadership, spending, and they're dealing with the challenges I just described and finding it difficult to make the transitions they need to make. The second one is the empowered machine. Here we're talking about intelligent agents, AI, that are transforming and automating business operations and also the customer engagement. So we'll talk more about what that means. And then finally, the evolving nature of trust. We're seeing a transition from a model where people trust institutions to ones where they don't. And they're shifting to more trust in the network of the masses, underpinned by blockchain. And that has big implications, we think, for businesses and the models that they've employed all these years. So with that background, let me now get us started. I'll hand this over to Fred, and he'll start with the first one, the digital crisis.
Thanks a lot, Dane. So as Dane said, when we looked at some of the results that we collected throughout the year, business, interviewing business and technology leaders, one of the key metrics that we tracked on the interesting finding was that 60% of them felt they were behind on their digital transformation initiatives. And that's putting their firms at risk. Right? What we think, and what I'm seeing working with our clients here in the region, is that they're starting to also understand that, well, this digital transformation that everybody talks about, this is not a surgical thing that you will apply on one department. It has to basically have, that means a wholesale business transformation that will impact all the competencies that you have within your organization. Strategy, culture, structure, organizational structure, talent, and technology. But what about Singapore? So we were also interested to take a deeper, more granular look at what Singaporean organizations are doing from a digital transformation perspective. And we applied this Forrester digital business maturity framework to try and understand what are some of the capabilities, what are some of the practices, what are some of the actions that these companies are implementing and trying to scale across their organization as part of these digital transformation initiatives. So I want to show you a couple of results, data points, knowing that what I'm showing you is quite high level. We will publish a report that goes much deeper into the specificities and what some of these Singaporean companies are doing versus what they are not doing and what they should be doing, according to us. These are 40 large blue chip Singaporean companies across banking, insurance, retail, transportation, and so on. So here are, first of all, the aggregated results, which is a 28 score on a number of that goes up to 60. We have, segmented this matrix into three different areas. One is established, so it's basically how do we start building the practices around the 5 competencies that I was talking about earlier. So as you see, these organizations have started on their digital transformation, but they have not reached the point where they are advanced. In these reports that we will publish, we will also benchmark this particular number with the rest of, different geographies in Australia, in the US, in Europe, and so on. So stay tuned for that. What I wanted to do is to share a little bit more details on the scores against each one of these different competencies. And not surprisingly, we see strategy and technology as being the areas where they tend to be the most mature. That's where they have launched differentiated practices that focus on customers. That's where they also are trying to put in place some rigor, some discipline on how to apply some of these practices across their organizations. But quite frankly, this is the easy part of the transformation. The harder, much more harder part is going to be around culture, the organizational structure. So for instance, how do you organize along customer journeys, which is something that I know some of you are working on right now, but it's extremely difficult to implement. Right? And the real key problem, the real key challenge that organizations are facing today is talent. Scarcity of talent. When you think about digital skills, how do you attract? How do you nurture? How do you retain some of the digital skills around CX, design, data scientists, and so on? So that's basically the little bit of background that leads to our first prediction, where I think, and we think, organizations will focus their efforts in 2018 and beyond, which is around employee experience. And we're going to see organizations apply some of the CX practices that they have developed over the past few years to their employees. A little bit more background on that prediction. This is not Forrester data, but this is some of the data that you can find very easy online. If you go to the Gallup survey, which is an employee engagement survey, that shows that almost 80% of employees in Singapore are either non-engaged or actively disengaged. 80%, almost. And I love this other quote, another article that I found in Business Insider here in Singapore. Only 3% of employees in Singapore perceive the strong alignment between what their employer says about itself and their experience working there. So as organizations are trying to recruit these digital skills, they are promising an amazing work environment, but the reality is very different. And there's other data point that I wanted to share with you. That's a thought leadership piece that we did for a technology company called LogMeIn around collaboration practices in Singapore and Hong Kong. And one of the very interesting data points was that 33%, a third of information workers in Singapore and Hong Kong would be inclined to look for another job if they cannot use the preferred collaboration tool. So that's what's putting your digital transformation at risk. I mean, one of the things that is putting your digital transformation at risk, as you're trying to attract these new digital skills, digital talents, and they start their first day at your office, and they are completely underwhelmed by what they're seeing. Okay, and the technology, the application that they're using. So the prediction. Again, we think that personalized employee experience will be the key to driving employee retention and engagement. And that will go through different phases. I think in 2018, there will be a lot more consideration around employee experience. This idea that we need to focus more on creating working environments that is conducive to innovation, that is conducive to the digital transformation initiatives that you are trying to launch. We'll see organizations use a lot more customer journey mapping, which is still, if I remember correctly, only 13% organizations in Asia Pacific are using customer journey mapping to support their technology implementation initiatives. 13%. So hopefully we will see this number rise to a higher percentage. But the real firms, the firms that will really be successful, will be the ones trying to personalize the employee experience. So I wanted to give you an example of one of such firms, which is DBS, which is they did an interesting initiative within the call center team, and they launched Alive, which is a mobile app dedicated for the the call center staff earlier this year, because they noticed that they had a disconnected employee experience from an application perspective, first and foremost, which is the call center staff had to go through different applications in order to get the job done, in order to get their scheduling, in order to get the performance appraisal, in order to get connected with their peers. So they decided to merge everything into one mobile app dedicated for the staff, and that I think helped them to reduce churn and attrition by half, among other metrics that they were tracking here. The other thing I like about this example is that this app was developed by the call center team. So they understand with AI, with automation, that there's going to be a lot of transformation happening within the call center organization, right? And some of the jobs will have to go. So they have proactively upskilled and reskilled some of their staff, and some of them are now mobile app developer, which is quite interesting, and that developing this mobile app. So a few recommendations before we move to the next prediction. Begin with common employee journeys, especially the ones like in the DBS example where you have a disconnected experience, right? Because when you think about it also, employees are consumers. And the consumer expectations right now is that anytime they engage a brand, they receive a personalized treatment, personalized experience. We see that moving into the office now with the employees as well. You need to, the good news is that you have done this for customer engagements for a number of years now, so you can apply these practices, this methodology, but focus on creating employee system of engagement that are more personalized and better attuned to the employee needs and desires. Obviously, leverage machine learning, recommendation engine, analytics to be able to leverage this personalization at scale, and leverage gamification to develop this intrinsic motivation. So that's for the first prediction. Let me move it over to Xiaofang, who's going to talk about some B2C marketing predictions.
Thank you. So in the end of last year, Forrester made a prediction that 30% of CMOs will become redundant. And a few months later, in March 2017, we see Coca-Cola get rid of their global CMO role and replaced it with a chief growth officer, combining marketing, customer, and sales leadership. So for this year, CMO's role is shifting to growth and customer experience. So Coca-Cola is not the only company that replacing the role of CMO. There are other fast FMCG companies are doing that as well. So like Hershey's and Kellogg's. And there are other companies using different titles to replace CMO, Chief Marketing and Customer Officer like Mars, or Chief Customer Officer like Banana Republic and Gap. And in Asia Pacific, we see even longer titles. Chief Customer Marketing and Digital Officer for Prudential, and Chief Marketing Digital Data and Customer Officer for AXA Asia. Yeah, when I received that guy's business card, I was really surprised. Yeah, and there are also some companies, they keep the title of CMO, but transfer the role of Chief Marketing Officer, like J.Crew and Citi. So it covers different industries. Because marketers or CMOs, they are under pressure to deliver business outcomes. And their CEO and CFO asking them, okay, you spend a lot of money in marketing. Where's the return of investment? So that's why marketers, they face top challenges right now in Asia Pacific. So here are the top 5 marketing challenges in Asia Pacific. They are related to 2 things, customer-centric and result-driven. The top one, nearly half of marketers we surveyed in Asia Pacific is that they don't know how to measure results or return of marketing investment. And 31%, they don't know how to attribute marketing performance across interactions, across channels. So marketing become more and more complex. So you want to deliver cross-channel and personalized customer engagement. It takes a lot of effort. 71% of marketers in Asia Pacific, they want to increase their spend on MarTech next year. So here's our prediction. Successful CMOs will own the entire end-to-end brand experience. So for traditional role of CMO, so they only look after customer acquisition, so before the purchase. So they let the sales team look after sales and customer service team look after customer service and experience. So now CMOs, they have to oversee both acquisition to purchase and to customer service and the entire experience. So we have 3 recommendations for CMOs today. First, they have to optimize their advertising or marketing spending and invest in high frequency, emotion rich, and connected brand experiences. So we all know P&G actually cut $140 million in digital advertising budget this year. And in the next 5 years, they will cut $2 billion. So marketers, they are under the increasing pressure to deliver business outcomes. And marketing is no longer a cost center. It's a revenue generating center. So you have to deliver, you have to help business to grow. Second, build a MarTech strategy and invest in talent development. So we surveyed marketers in Asia Pacific. 50% of them said they don't have a MarTech strategy. So they even don't know how to work with sales and IT and other departments to come up together with a common strategy for technology investment. And we also talked to marketers in the region. So a large insurance company in Singapore told us they have invested in lots of MarTech solutions. They spend lots of money, but they are waiting for someone to operate on day-to-day basis. So they are eager to hiring someone, like they know MarTech quite well, but the talent is very scarce in the region. So the third one, drive business growth by combining marketing, customer, and commercial leadership. So the CMO is not just CMO. So for sales, marketing, e-commerce, and customer experience, you have to know it all. You have to speak all these languages. And consumers, they are increasingly demanding for more new type of experiences. It's the age of customer. So here comes the immersive experience. We see more and more emerging technologies that help deliver more engaged experiences to consumers, including AR and VR, and voice-based intelligent agents, and image. So iPhone 10 has the Face ID, facial recognition, and who knows the guy in the bottom? So that's Jack Ma. So he tested their facial recognition payment service in their new event in November 11. So for voice, we know Alexa is quite popular in the US, and the brands use it to engage with customers, like taking orders for pizza or ride hailing. And so in China, actually, Alibaba launched the similar device, but at a much cheaper price. So in the past Singles Day, my friend just booked one at a great discount, which is only 99 RMB, that is 20 cents. So it's really cheap. So we expect the adoption rate in China will be much faster than in the US and other countries because of the device is much cheaper and more affordable there. And for facial recognition, so companies like KFC already are applying facial recognized based payment service for Alipay Smile to Pay service in their stores in Hangzhou. So for AR and VR, we see last year there's a lot of buzz about that. But our prediction for 2018 is AR will deliver value, but VR won't. So let's see, Singles Day in 2016, Alibaba is the pioneer of applying AR and VR into business. So they launched Buy Plus VR in last year's Singles Day. And consumers, when they wear the VR gear, which is also very cheap, it's 1 RMB, it's like 20 cents. And so consumers can use the gear to buy at a virtual store of Macy's. But we don't see a lot of value there because they can buy from Macy's on the Tmall store as well, and or on Macy's.com. And they also launched a very successful AR coupon campaign, which is very similar to Pokemon Go. But we see Pokemon Go, there are not that many business use cases yet. But Alibaba, they took the idea and applied it into action. So for Starbucks alone last year, there were more than 270 million coupons were redeemed through this AR coupon campaign on Singles Day last year. But this year, when I asked Alibaba why you don't promote VR Buy Plus anymore, because clearly we can see there are not value on PR, and they secretly changed Buy Plus from VR to AR. For example, if you want to buy furniture online, you can use Buy Plus AR to test what it will look like if this couch sit in my living room. And also it's like AR fitting room and AR makeup testing are not new ideas, but Alibaba leveraged those ideas and applied it into not just online but offline stores. So there are over 6,000 pop-up smart stores in offline for this year's Singles Day. And the next thing is AR Sky Eye, and I don't see it's available in many offline stores yet, but they described to me the idea. I think it's really cool. For example, you sell like a microwave or a washing machine, and consumers use a mobile phone to scan it, then you will know what the machine looks inside and how it actually works. You can watch a video, and it's like you apply X-ray to the machine. You know exactly it looks like inside. It's very cool. And so for recommendations, it's for digital business leaders. You have to address cross-channel consistency before embracing emerging technologies. So marketers or companies, they are getting so excited about all these new emerging technologies and they want to experiment it. That's good because you will have higher chance to become a pioneer in your industry. But you have to fix the basics of channel inconsistency yet. If you cannot connect your online data with your offline data, for example, what's the point to apply AR coupon campaign? The second thing is you always need to start with business-aligned KPIs for emerging technology initiatives. So for anything you spend in emerging technologies, the point is what are your business goals? What kind of KPIs you want to set and how you can achieve that. The next thing is, so we talked about Alibaba and Amazon Alexa. So for most companies, they don't have the resources and the budget to invest in emerging technologies. So the smart way to do is you have to work with digital ecosystem players like Alibaba, Amazon, and Facebook, and you can borrow those experiences from them. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred and Xiaofeng. So we wanted to give a chance to ask questions as we move along. We have just a few minutes for this before we move on to the next one. So any questions from anyone? I want to see who's the bravest in the room. Anyone? Yes, please.
Can you also comment on how these AR, VR, and other technologies are affecting employee productivity?
Employee productivity. Okay. Fred, you want to take that?
I can share one experience. I recently tested the Facebook Spaces. You know, so you have the and then you have some dongles that you use. It's actually pretty cool because you have this virtual table and you have people that are dialing in from Singapore, Melbourne, San Francisco, and so on, and you can actually manipulate digital objects, you know, in 3D. You know, it's really immersive experience. But my first reaction to that is like, wow, this is super cool. The second one is like, how do we use it? And you know, it's just if you want to waste your time, it's amazing. So I think it's really cool experiences. I still struggle to understand what's going to be the value from a business perspective, because and obviously it still takes a huge amount of time to set up, you know, and to you know, it's still not plug and play, and the use cases are still elusive for me. Just on that particular VR, thanks for example.
Yes, please.
I mean, for AR, I think a lot of the technology still searching the use case, right? One of the big barriers to adoption seems to be that it has to be kind of app-based at the moment, and not everyone wants to sort of download an app for every brand that wants to experience AR. Do you have a view on how that's going to change or not?
So I know that the iPhone X will probably accelerate the adoption because they are making it much easier for users to actually have this augmented reality experience. But I agree with you. I think it's still, in most cases, a marketing gimmick, and we have not seen any major breakthrough in terms of customer value or business value.
And I think it's a good point you raised, though, with the new iPhone, with the new smartphones, you're seeing them embed AR more into the platform itself, such that you don't need to download the app, and it's actually part of the experience that customers will start to, they'll get used to, and it will become more accessible as a result, I think, from an AR perspective. But that's another boost, I think, that kind of backs up this prediction. Yeah. Good question, thanks. So we'll take the 3 questions and we'll move on, so please go ahead.
When one of the presenters, they spoke about MarTech and AI and the gap of finding digital talent. It's not about like acquiring digital talent and then trying to retain them. Sometimes the issue is about the people in the hiring positions when they're assessing talent on AR, MarTech, and AI. They have no idea what they're talking about. So we've often seen, so my person to my right as well is, we are marketing journalists and we interview CMOs and CIOs every single day, and oftentimes they will talk about things like, we are looking for MarTech talent, not AI talent, but when we ask them 3-4 simple questions, it's very clear that the person making the final decision of who to hire has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. What is Forrester doing to empower people to actually put people in charge who actually know what they're talking about, instead of just know 5-4 consistent jargon?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So, our business is to try to help our customers understand what's happening, to give them the tools and the access to the information so they can understand. To talk about some of the changes we talked about today to help challenge them, to learn about these technologies and capabilities. So through the information to the research that we provide, the data, the advisory, the consulting, all of that, we are very much working very, very hard to try to help educate and train. So we do see that. I think the mix, though, is changing. And as the CMO role changes as well, I think it's becoming more aware, and the different types of people will incidentally We see the same thing on the technology side. A lot of CIOs who want to run tech, they want to talk about servers and storage, they don't want to talk about business outcomes. So I don't know that it's only the CMO, I think it's maybe the entire organization needs to transform. So thanks for the question. Okay, so we have a question over here.
Yes, actually, CIO, I'm just very curious about what's the gap now between CMOs and CIOs, and how are they working together to drive a common goal? Because I do see a disconnect that CIOs is very much into infrastructure and operational, not so much on creating value. So the value part is still missing. Is it because where they come from, they don't quite get it, or no? So what's Forrester doing to help narrow the gap between the CMOs and CIOs?
Sure. Fred, maybe I'll let you take this one first. One of your favorite topics.
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress. Let's put it that way. I think, you know, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the next session, next theme around the collaborative nature that needs to be, or collaborative culture that needs to be created within an organization. And I think it's still, it's difficult, but we expose, we tell them, you know, what some of the digital leaders are doing. We try to educate on the metrics. Also, you know, I think aligning the metrics, because when you think about, you know, what metrics a CMO is measured against, what a CIO is measured against, and you know, head of business lines are measured against, they are completely, you know, non-aligned, and sometimes even contradicting each other. So it's not easy, but it's yeah, that's some of the work that we do.
And I think it's, you know, what we find is that it really requires the CEO, frankly. So there's a lot of discussion in the past on who should lead digital transformation. Should be the CMO, the CIO, should be both in collaboration. Really, it's the CEO. And the CEO needs to set the stage and push them to work together. So in a meeting with a quick service food company, and he asked me who should be leading, the CEO said, who should be leading our digital transformation? I said, you should, the CEO. But he didn't want to hear that. It was pretty clear that's all he wanted to hear. He said, I already have so many things to do, so on and so forth. That's really where the leadership needs to come from. One interesting thing that we found was with the CX index, we looked at the leaders, and we looked at the relationship between the CIO and the CMO. And we found that the leaders compared to the laggards, the CMO and the CIO sat 70% closer at leaders than the laggards. And usually they sat door to door. So the leaders seem to get this. It's the laggards that are struggling more. Okay, I'm going to move us along. Please keep the questions coming. If you want to ask questions on these in the next section, that's fine. But in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to the next one, which is the empowered machine. And I'll hand it over once again to Xiaofang. Thank you.
Yes. So, very fun topic, marketing and AI. So when we asked companies, so which department is leading the initiative of AI and investment of AI? And surprisingly, the #1 department is marketing. Because marketing, as I mentioned, is becoming more and more complex. So it has lots of data. We have the capability to acquire lots of customer information. But we have to make a decision much faster, and we have a lot of more information to access. So that's why it's beyond human capacity. That's why we need technology. That's why we need AI in marketing. And the differences of AI in marketing and the traditional marketing is whether you can deliver personalization at scale. So here's a perfect example on Singles Day 2017, what Alibaba achieved. So Alibaba has the AI-empowered design platform. It's created 400 million customized banner ads in just 24 hours. That is 8,000 customized banner ads per second. That's really impressive. And it handled, they have the AI-empowered chatbot for customer service. It handled 3.5 million customer inquiries. According to Alibaba, that's 10,000 faster than human customer service. So I did a calculation, which is 40 customer inquiry per second. And for human, on average, it's one inquiry per 4 minutes. And also Alibaba delivered 60 billion personalized pages throughout their websites and mobile apps. So we don't see anywhere else of this scale. Alibaba can achieve this because they, in the past 9 years, so they build up all of those experience and data. They know consumer behaviors, they know what they want to purchase, they know what types of banner ads are more effective to influence the purchase decisions. So based on this, they can apply AI into marketing. Here's our prediction. 10% of purchase decisions will be guided by a platform's agent, like Alibaba's chatbot. So in the age of customer, the power has shifted away from companies to consumers. And we leveraged AI and intelligent agents to collect data about everything about consumers. And then we want to make decisions in real time. So we want to predict what's the next steps for our consumers. So the next step is intelligent agents will use those data to increasingly influence consumers. I know what you may want to buy the next, and I know which ad is more effective on you. So recommendations for marketing leaders. You have to test. You have to start with small tasks, like personalize your website, or like automate your email send out time. Because those are easy to measure, and then you will know the return of investment. Second, as I mentioned, Alibaba can do this. It's not just because of the technology, it's because of the content and the data they have in the past. So for AI, you need AI to break through to deliver. The technology alone won't help. You have to build up content, and you have to let machine to train and learn. And you have to treat AI adoption as a cross-department effort. You have to work with your customer insights professionals and your data team, as well as technology team to deliver. I'll pass this to Charlie.
Thank you, Xiaofeng. Just now, Xiaofeng talked about the impact of artificial intelligence towards consumers and marketing professionals. But I came from the world of the technology, which is totally different from her world. And still, we have seen a great impact of AI toward the enterprise customers and enterprise architecture. And you can see from the slide, the AI is actually quite complex. It has a lot of building blocks there, like the machine learning platform, deep learning platform, or the image recognition, or NLP, which is pretty boring. And but still has a lot of application areas there, like the robotic process automation or decision management. So that's why we have seen that enterprises must AIize their applications. And that's why we forecast that next year, 20% of the enterprises will leverage AI to make the real-time decisions and to have the very effective instructions there. And here's a case from the Woodside. Woodside is Australia's largest energy company, and they have been in the whole world, have been the leader in the past 50 years. And what's their secret? Their secret is their employees. They have been invest a lot in their employees, especially the engineers. They're so smart and they're so experienced, and they're able to provide the very effective decisions. And after decision making, they will put everything into the archived documents there. But time flies, and these people will retire for sure. And then the knowledge also leaves with them. So they feel it's kind of disruption for them. How can they tackle that? They leverage the analytic capabilities. They leverage the NLP. They use that kind of technology to analyze all kinds of different reports, the decision logs, and those kinds of conversations within the emails and the purchase orders. And they're able to build up a knowledge base about all those insights and use the robot to support their decision making. So now they will never worry about the churn rate of their employees because they can have the business continuity based on the artificial intelligence. So our recommendation for you would be you have to choose your AI targets very carefully. Because first, you are facing some of situations that you are being disrupted, and you should start with that. You should think about how you can tackle all those challenges, and you have to focus on the areas that have the most impact towards the business performance. Just like the case from the wood side. They're being disrupted by themselves, by their own employees. So they started with that, and they figured out how to resolve the issue with the NLP. And also, you have to choose the targets across the whole company. We have seen a lot of excitement from Xiaofeng's side regarding the consumers and the customer-facing processes, but also we should think about how we should de-risking. We should de-risk all the facts there. We should think about how we can improve governance, how we can ensure the business processes across the whole company. So that is our recommendation for you to start with the AI. And then let's talk about the cloud for a while. As you all know, cloud has already become the foundation for the modern infrastructure, from compute, network, or storage. It has also expanded to another area, or a much broader area, which is the innovation platform. It can support a lot of other technology areas, like the IoT, blockchain, and also for the big data, for example, as you can see from the slide, those cloud-based analytic services have become so critical to different stakeholders within the company, such as the foundational analytic services for the DevOps teams, or the visual analytic services for the BI teams. So that's what we have seen, according to our data, 45% of the decision makers within the company, they're gonna use the cloud solutions to replace or complement their existing BI solutions or analytics capabilities. And what will happen next year? Next year, we'll see half of the firms, they're gonna adopt a cloud-first strategy for their big data analytics. And here's a case from the Carousel. Carousel is one of the most popular peer-to-peer e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia. Has anybody sold anything on that platform? Wow, that's a lot. All right. So Carousel is used the cloud analytics for their business operations. Why is that? Because they focus on the customer experience. They want to ensure every buyer and seller will have the best experience on that platform. So they don't want to invest too much on the infrastructure, like the GPUs, FPGA, or the TensorFlow frameworks. They don't want to do that. They just want to focus on the customer experience. So they leverage the Google's vision services. They use that to analyze all the pictures and photos uploaded onto the platform. After you upload the picture, the service will automatically analyze what is that product, and they will give you a recommendation automatically. You don't need to worry about that. In just 30 seconds, you'll be able to sell your product, which is so convenient. That's why so many of you are doing that. So that is the benefit. That is the strategic benefit of the cloud-first strategy. In order to embrace these benefits, our recommendation for you regarding the cloud would be you should invest in hybrid and you should re-architect for the public. First, you should think about the hybrid cloud management. That is the stepping stone for you to go to the public cloud platform. You might want to leverage the hybrid cloud solutions, the platforms, for you to manage different scenarios and adoption cases. And also, you might want to leverage the cloud data transfer appliances to help you migrate the data from on-premise onto the cloud. you also need to think about the application architecture. For some of the monolithic applications, it might not work very well. And you should think about microservices, about those serverless capabilities, about the AI APIs to help you modernize the application architecture, to help you ensure the agility and elasticity over the public cloud platform. So that is the key takeaways about the cloud. And then let's move on to the next topic, which is the Internet of Things. For IoT, it has already become, once again, the building block for the digital business. We have seen 3 key scenarios for IoT adoption. The first one is regarding the assets. It's regarding the monitoring and control of the assets. It will tell you where is the asset and how does it work. And then it will come to the predictions and actions about the assets. It will tell you how long it will work and if it fails, what you should do. And the last part, this is regarding powering the new business models. It can help you to shift your model from a product-based one onto the service-based one. It will also help you to engage your customers in a data-driven approach. So here's the prediction for next year. IoT growth will be spurred by the system of insight. And this boring architecture chart is my favorite. So it is regarding the architecture for the system of insight. It actually has 5 building blocks. So on the right side, you can see that is the instrumentation layer, which consists of applications, processes, devices. And in the middle, you will have the data hub. The data pipeline will help you to inject the data from everywhere. And IoT will play a very important role there. It will help you to gather data and to aggregate data and help you to ensure you have the contextual data for your decision management. And with the data, you have the third component, which is the analytics engine. And AI is the key enabler for that. You should also have the translation framework to help you translate insights into the actions. And then you should have the data fabric underneath to ensure the elasticity of our overall system. So that is the system of insights. That's actually the brain of the empowered machines. So our recommendation for you is to focus on 2 sides. Focus on the insights of 2 sides. Insights of your customers and insights of your operations. That's actually the 2 dimensions defined by Forrester for the digital business. And in order to achieve all these insights, technology cannot do that by ourselves. Marketing cannot do that by themselves. We have to work together. We have to build a cross-organizational team to have 3 things: the domain knowledge, the data skills, as well as the technology management capabilities. And after we work together, we should also design, to build, and to run our IoT processes and devices together and to derive the value out of it. And so that is the key thing for the empowered machines. From technology perspective, you should have the AI, you should have the IoT, and you should have the cloud platform to support your digital transformation. Thanks.
I'll take the clicker here. So we will now move on to the Q&A again. Let me move it back here. Okay. So once again, we'll open it up for questions. Obviously, AI is a very, very hot topic, so is IoT. So you can ask about these predictions or anything else on those subjects. Do you have a question? Yeah.
I actually had for shop and capacity.
Okay. Yeah, sure, no problem. You can ask the previous section as well.
Yes, my question is, you had a chart, where you showed the 5 marketing challenges.
Yeah.
The first one was, the ROI, and then the last one was attribution. But the lack of attribution is one of the biggest reasons why the measurement of ROI is so hard. So what else do you see aside from attribution are the challenges, that ROI really challenges?
I think one of the key challenges are data silos. because they cannot see the entire view of the customers from end to end. Because some data, like campaign data, they sit in the marketing team, and customer relationship data sits in the sales department, and other technology team has other data, and the customer service team has the customer satisfaction data. And these departments, they don't talk to each other. So for each department, for marketing, they can only measure a piece of the big picture, not the entire picture.
Okay. Another question? Please go ahead.
I want to refer to the earlier presentation where you mentioned that Singapore is at the established level of the digital market maturity level. I want to know what are some examples of the country that reached the advanced level and innovation level, and what you think Singapore can do to reach that level. Thank you.
So 28 is not a bad score. This is not a. So I don't have the benchmark data, so I'm not able to give you, Germany is there, and Australia is there, and Singapore is there. So that's coming up. We will publish that. That's one of my predictions for 2018. That will become true. It's not a. What we try to measure with this digital metrics framework is the kind of discipline, the actions that companies are doing and following along around alignment, rigor, insights and metrics. And insight, think of it as a feedback loop that they use to measure, the progress that they're making. One thing that is really, so the alignment is pretty, relatively easy for organizations to do, and that's where they tend to be the most mature. The real problem is around rigor. And this ability for organizations to define the processes in a repeatable way, and being able to scale that across the organization so that everybody is using the same approach and strategy, talent, and so on and so on. So, and that's a really difficult part, creating this discipline, this rigor on how to create and follow, these different practices.
I think another one is just the employee experience that you talked about, right? So if you look at that data on levels of dissatisfaction with employees, Singapore is quite a bit higher than a lot of places where people who are actively disengaged or just not engaged at all. And I think initially I was talking to a CIO of Singtel, and she drove a transformation across multiple countries, including Australia and Singapore. And when I asked her, well, what's the difference? She said, well, Australians are much more effusive. So they'll tell you what they're thinking, they'll tell you what's on their mind, and you can get them engaged. She said, in Singapore, it's a lot harder to get people to talk, to say what they're thinking and feeling. So I think this EX angle is something that here that's important, because you have two levels, right? A lot of times in Singapore, you don't always hear what people are feeling, and it seems there's a problem. In a lot of other companies that are driving transformations, it gets stuck in the middle. So at a place like DBS, you can have the executive team drive transformation very nicely, but then it goes into the middle of the organization and it's frozen, it gets stuck, and they need to kind of push it through there. I think those are two areas that are quite important for Singapore to rise to the next level. Okay, yes, Freddie.
Thank you. Excellent presentations. I have a question about social. A couple of years ago, social was on everybody's lips. It hasn't appeared once in any of the slides here. So my question is, relevance of social, integration with AI, should we still be investing and thinking about it?
Thank you.
Yeah, so actually social still plays a very important part. Just the marketers, they are more mature, they know how social works. And also social plays as a part of the entire digital marketing ecosystem. Social alone cannot just work by itself. And social and AI, I think the key use cases would be chatbot, because a lot of chatbots, they sit on social platforms like Facebook Messenger or WeChat. And also social produces lots of data, and it requires a lot of data to empower AI.
What do you think, Fred? Do you need to add on the social side? Better?
No, and I think the marketing organization understand that's the key channel, and they need to be plugged into in order to collect information, and they use that as part of their automation initiatives within marketing. We haven't seen massive transformation or massive changes in the social media listening tools, for instance, and platforms. So hence, maybe this is not central. It's still extremely important. We haven't seen anything changing drastically over the past year, I think, in that space.
Thanks. We have a question back here in a minute. Yeah. Please go ahead.
First of all, the presentations are great so far. The last one was probably the best so far. Let's see what the next one is. I was at the CX event a couple of months ago. That was mind-blowing, the revelations that came out of there. So this one's also that's great. I'm going to go in a bit of an analogy. A couple of years ago, there was a controversy with Subway, the fast food deli chain, where someone had measured the footlong, and turned out the footlong was actually 9 inches. And Subway came back with a statement saying, well, actually, footlong isn't an adjective, it's actually a noun, and we've registered the word footlong as a trademark, which is what my counterpart would probably agree on. We're often finding that companies that come out and say, we're doing AI, machine learning, these are actually nouns. These are actually trademarks that they're using. These are ways of describing the product more than talking about the attributes of the capabilities of the product, which is what AI and ML is supposed to be. It's one of those things where most people in this room probably have PTSD related to the word innovation. So what is Forrester doing to help its clients understand who is truly AI and who is just marketing themselves as AI?
Yeah, so I think it's spot on. It's almost as if you woke up one day and like every technology wonder in the world is to become an AI company. That's like, it's the day before you were digital transformation experts, and now you're AI experts. I don't understand. So anyway, I agree. There's a lot of confusion on that. What we do is that we develop frameworks to help you understand what are these capabilities. Are these technologies? Are these solutions? Are these capabilities? And then also look at the maturity of these solutions as well. So if you look at, are they truly emerging at deep learning, or are we talking about regression, linear regression type of machine learning tools, which are much more advanced and much more capable today. So that's one of the things that we do as far as the frameworks that we develop to try and help you guys understand, is this truly AI? Is this, and what do we define also? I mean, analysts are, one of our key tasks is definition, creating definition about what AI is, or what, Charlie was talking about system of insights earlier. Anyway, so that's one of the things that we do. We also have what we call tech ties, which are looking at a set of technology environments and defining the maturity of these technologies. Maybe Charlie, you want to share your thoughts on that, because you're working actively in that space.
Yeah. So the tech tie just now mentioned by Fred, this is pretty critical for all the audience there to understand what's the terminology, what is happening there in the industry. And also there's so much confusion there. For example, when I talk with a lot of companies regarding robotic process automation, and they said, we don't need that. We are not manufacturing industry. We don't need the robots. So which is, so from the feedback, I can see that it's quite confusing, that it's kind of software technology, not only about manufacturing. So that's our responsibility to clarify what's the architecture for my role, what's the building blocks there underneath, and how you can enable all different scenarios there to support your transformation. So that's our job.
Okay, thanks guys. Okay, last question.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us to this exciting event. It's always great to be here. Just wanted to highlight one thing. There's a lot of airtime being spent on digital, and I would say somebody mentioned marketing gimmicks. What about the core product and services? There's a lot of exciting stuff happening around that. For instance, the show that you have on your shoes, It's now being used on your bicycle tires. The screen of your mobile is actually the feel of a leaf. So there's a lot of innovations happening on the core stuff, which is basically being supported by digital and other marketing stuff. So isn't there any predictions on those ones?
So on the materials?
On the materials and the products and the core services, which is completely disruptive, which actually supports the revenue growth in a much higher as opposed to the other stuff around it.
I'm not sure. I think on the, I mean, a couple examples would be on the AI and the IoT being embedded into the product itself, right? So and even in fact AR, we spoke about it earlier with the new iPhone. So I think these technologies are being embedded into the products in a more intelligent way. I think Forrester's view is that technology is an enabler. What you really need to understand is the business impact and the customer journey, how it makes a difference for them. Technology for the sake of technology is of limited value. It's really about how do you bake it into that customer experience and help to generate growth. So we help our clients understand with AI, with IoT, with AR, why are you doing this and how can you embed that into the overall experience rather than focusing too much on just the technology itself, basically. Yeah. But we do help our clients with things like design thinking workshops and things of that nature, which do touch on the product or the service that they offer. Okay. Sorry, Tom, did you have something you want to say? Or?
No, my presentation is finished already.
All right, talk fast. No, I'm just kidding. Here you go. You got a new clock.
All right, so I'm going to talk about trust, and I will try to cover partly your question. So, how many of you know me? Probably not that many, but how many? And may I ask you, do you trust me? Okay. So you don't trust me. I've known you for 3 years. Question: do you feel like the person that demands your trust or expects it, does he have to do any work? Does he have to do things on a regular basis to maintain the trust? Is that sort of a common thing? People have to work for it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just keep that thought, and I'll try to challenge it. Newsflash. This happened about a month ago, like a month and a half ago. I mean, it actually happened earlier, but it was reported later. So sometimes companies do that. It's sort of like, something happens, a bad thing happens, they sit on it, they try to contain it. Equifax could no longer contain it. It was one of the largest sort of data breaches sort of in that industry. It wasn't by far the largest ever. It wasn't the first one. It certainly wasn't the last one. Yesterday we heard about Uber. That also got breached, and was it 57 million records were stolen out of there. What's so special about this situation? I mean, to me, when this happened, I was actually researching something else about credit reporting industry, and just so happened, this Equifax was in the news in a very negative way. To me, it wasn't the fact that it was attacked or it was hacked and some information was stolen. What was really interesting is the public outburst that it created. Okay, it became a public debate. The U.S. Senate hurried to schedule a hearing, got the CEO in the room and beat on him for, I don't know, 2-3 hours. Kind of made him a scapegoat, made a show, public show. But the questions that the senators were asking, that's kind of where I concentrated my attention, because they're elected officials and they represent the public, and by that I mean, the 187 pissed off Americans, which is probably a large chunk, if not, probably the majority of the consumers with financial credit histories and things like that. There was a lot of anger, and they directed that anger towards Equifax's CEO, but the kind of questions that they're asking, that was the interesting part. There were existential questions, like why consumers don't have the option to opt in before companies like Equifax are allowed to access their data. Access their data, own data. So if Equifax does not have access to data, Equifax cannot exist. They weren't asking things, I mean, majority of the questions were like, you know what, you didn't pay for that data, that data isn't yours, you're hoarding that data, okay, and then you make money off of that data. Why should you be entitled to have that data in the first place? And then you keep, you make money off of it, you can't even keep it secure, okay? You don't disclose how you rate, what do you use in your ratings, okay? Customers don't understand it. Well, customers are really pissed off. So why should you be trusted? Why should you exist? So that was, to me, it was a huge realization, and I think the Equifax breach is just the beginning. It's just opened eyes, and now consumers, elected officials, regulators, et cetera, they're going to try to solve this issue, but it's not a cybersecurity issue. It's more of a trust issue, okay? And it's put Equifax and information services industries right in the sort of in the hot seat, and that is the lack of trust. Should no longer be ignored. Technologies like blockchain have been talked about for years, but it is probably just now becoming mainstream. The advertising industry bureau is like an association that represents all the ad agencies and whatever. They've done the analysis of this technology. They found many use cases, and they said this is the kind of technology that cannot be ignored any longer. We've got to put it to use. And it describes it in a press release: fully verifiable, immutable, undeletable. What else do you need to be convinced, to feel convinced that this can be trusted and should no longer be ignored? So they launched the technology lab, and they've gotten all their members, and they have hundreds of thousands and thousands of members. They've gotten them together, sort of like in a think tank type of a situation. They've analyzed the different use cases and the common needs of the industry, and they went ahead and started producing blockchain solutions. And within a year, they created something like 12, over a dozen actual solutions that are used in ad agencies. And it's like the kind of things that they're tracking there with blockchain, trying to solve things like fraud, things like billings, stuff that affects them. And it's very similar to banking, the kind of stuff that they were trying to use it for. The story here is blockchain can be trusted. For those of you who understand what blockchain is, or at least have a sort of a, at least in your mind, like a visual of what that looks like, just think about that for a second, okay? The word blockchain sort of came out like a few years ago, and people couldn't understand it, couldn't trust it, couldn't. And now it's starting to make sense to a whole lot of people, and they are ready to trust it. So Fred asked me to do it sort of like the before, the now, the after. So the before, the one-to-one relationships and the one-to-one trust. It existed since the Stone Age. I know you, I see you, I can feel you, I can shake your hand, I can trust you, right? And then it sort of got fragmented, it got extended. So I know you, you know someone. If I trust you and you trust that guy, maybe then I could trust that guy by extension. And then many-to-one relationships and many-to-one trust. Since tribes came into existence. So many people will elect a tribal leader, we can trust them directly, etc., etc. And then again, it got evolved in sort of in the modern sort of a computer age. It's like networks of many trusting one. I don't want to use like the U.S. elections example, because that's like an example how many-to-one trust is like gotten completely broken, hacked by the Russian hackers, for example, who sort of messed with that whole trust ecosystem. But it can also extend further, because it can source information and insights of trust and deliver it to the other many, and being the central sort of a conduit. So TripAdvisor is one of those. Is a many-to-one to many. Okay, they source information about experiences and things like that, about different people had visits, stayed in hotels, talk about those experiences and reviews and share it to many. The other many, the consumers trust TripAdvisor because TripAdvisor's business it is to collect that information to validate that it's real and legit, right? And if I trust TripAdvisor, then I mean, if I trust them doing the professional work they have to do to get this content out there, I'm ready to trust it. Equifax is supposed to be like one of those, but now it's proven that you cannot be trusted. Okay, so it's becoming weaker. So people are less and less ready to trust it. And the future is distributed trust. Okay, and this is a concept that will take time to sort of to stick, but basically with distributed databases and things like that, data provided by many, okay, based on permission, based on consent, could be placed and distributed among also many in an anonymous but direct way, okay, without having to have an intermediary, a sole monopolist of access, okay, and people are ready to trust that. So before I had to see you, I had to know you to trust you. Now I'm ready to trust you. I don't even have to know you. And you know what? It's even better than having to trust you by proxy, because these proxies like Equifax cannot be trusted anymore. So that's a pretty interesting shift to the future, and technologies like distributed databases, distributed ledgers, blockchain, things like that are going to empower. They're going to wire the world, individuals, consumers, businesses, small, medium enterprises, et cetera, they're going to wire them with the rest of the world on a permission basis. And that information, whatever it is that they provide, can be validated, like IAB said, irrefutable information, worthy of trust. So the other one is, and I'm going to lump them together, so second sort of prediction, has to do with privacy. So there's a lot of types of privacy. The new emerging, and probably we think at Forrester the most important type, is the contextual privacy. And contextual privacy is not a technology. Contextual privacy is an approach. It's a practice you have to do nowadays. You have to, and very importantly, contextual privacy is about consent. It's about having the consent. How many companies can say all their, customers are engaged and they give you the permission, for example, to market? I mean, I know, at least in financial institutions, large percentages, 20, 30, 40. I know in the top 3 banks, for example, here, that number could be about 50% opt-outs, people not ready to listen, don't have their permission. And earning it is very important. Contextual privacy is about that. Common problems, unauthorized use of personally identifiable information. Very, very big pain point. Okay? You have my number, you have my name, you have my address. Guess what? Now you can have my face. Like personally, I have a problem with that because it doesn't get any more personally identifiable than somebody having my face. But seriously, like we're exchanging this kind of stuff in chat groups. Okay, your face, your transaction, you can command a chat bot to perform a transaction, which can be then traced to you. Uber leaked, was breached. What's interesting to me is the fact that Uber was so uber protective of this data that they wouldn't even collaborate with FBI. When FBI wanted to force Uber share information about riders going from point A to B because they were suspects, criminal suspects or terrorist suspects. They had to subpoena them to force them to do this. FBI had to subpoena Facebook, for example, also to release this information. So unauthorized use of data, especially personal identifiable data, is a big deal to companies. Okay, to them, that could be the reason why people lose trust and their business goes away very quickly. And it's not going to be just an isolated number of like 400 pissed off customers. No, it's going to spread. It could be millions, and it could be really fast. It could be very, very, very dangerous and damaging. So unauthorized use of PII. Data security breaches, we all know that. That's just going to increase. Data espionage, like that's major. So nobody likes to be spied on, the big brother. And that's just, the more you do things digitally, the more of this sort of paranoia you're going to have. Consumers are going to have this paranoia. And unless enterprises are able to address that and earn that trust, then they will continue to be susceptible to burning that trust. And what I'm saying is, we can no longer afford to treat this lightly. So contextual privacy as a framework, as an approach, is a mindset, is a mind shift, is a fundamental differentiator for growth. And not only that, it's going to be fundamental for survival. Your company will enter the digital world. You will burn the trust faster than you can earn it. So treating this seriously is going to be fundamental for survival, competitiveness, and growth. So that's the prediction. A few basic recommendations. Understanding the ecosystem of trust. How many entities, people, parties do you rely on for you to be able to provide trust? Because sometimes this isn't just your trust, something that your organization or you as an individual can earn. You have to rely on an ecosystem of partners to get that trust proposition. So understanding contributions of individual players in that trust ecosystem and your role in it is going to be a very important sort of capability, skill. Define the objects of trust. What is it that actually makes or breaks trust? Because trust is a currency. If I don't have your trust, I mean, trust is something that people exchange and transfer. Companies do that too. That's what, for example, referrals mean. Somebody refers you, he's basically tokenizing his trust and transferring it. It's a currency. It's going to be more and more powerful. Therefore, it's important to understand what are those objects of trust, because we're all trading with it. Contextual privacy, that goes without saying. And lastly, I mentioned this a few times already, it's important to really sort of think about the kind of things you need to do to earn, and the kind of things that will come in, that will happen, that will burn it. Because that's going to be extremely key. So with that, I'll just finish and hand it over to Frederick.
Thank you. Well, you burned all my time. I don't trust you anymore, man. Cool. So I wanted to leave with you a last prediction. I'm still going to talk a little bit. I'm going to bring back the discussion towards digital ecosystem, which is something that we hear a lot of companies talk about these days, with all excitement around APIs and open ecosystems and so on and so on. One example I want to start with on this particular prediction is Alibaba. And what Alibaba is doing is probably one of the interesting role models that we can think about when we think about digital ecosystem. Obviously, they are not the only ones to look at what's going on in the insurance space, insurtech in China these days, with Baidu and Tencent and others, and Ping An. There's quite a bit of interesting innovations that are coming online, no pun intended. If you look at Alibaba, we all know Alibaba. They started in e-commerce as a disruptor of retail in China. What is interesting is how they moved from commerce to payments to financial services, and now moving into spaces like insurance. And I wanted to give you a few ideas on how they are doing that. Starting with leveraging Alipay, which is now part of Ant Financial, which is part of the Alibaba group, and they're using their Alipay insurance service platform as a way for insurance in China, like Ping An and that distributes insurance products, the Taiken example is interesting because when you pay using Alipay, you get in free health insurance. So the more you pay, the more you get covered for health insurance for free. Think about it for a minute. That's interesting, right? The other thing that they're using, and they announced all these initiatives over the past few months, so they are not just one particular approach. They have a multi-pronged approach to the insurance opportunity. They partnered with a technology company called eBaotech in China to create this, think of it as an insurance as a service type of platform where companies like Zhong'an would actually plug and that accelerate the ability to create new insurance products, very, very fast. And Zhong'an is also happens to be, a Jack Ma company, which is also interesting. But I think the real cool stuff that is happening there is from a health perspective, and that's the next big thing for Alibaba. As they move past the insurance play, it's really about how can they assemble a digital ecosystem of players in the healthcare space. So obviously working with insurance payers, health insurance payers, but also hospitals, pharmaceutical labs like GSK, for instance, that I didn't put in that slide, but they are moving aggressively into that space. How did they do that? How did they pull it off? And that's going back to what Tom was mentioning about trust. Obviously they are a digital player, so they leverage digital technologies to create value propositions that are faster, cheaper, better from a customer experience point of view. And because they have been successful in commerce and they have created a trust, they have created a trusted relationship with these customers. And because they have this trust, and they also, another thing which is scale, and the ability to collect massive amount of data about the customers, they have a very fine understanding of the needs and desires of these customers. And when we assemble the two, the trusted relationship and the knowledge about what customers want, they get then the permission from their customers to move to the adjacent possible, to move from commerce to payment, to financial services, to insurance, to healthcare. And they get this permission. So when I look at all this activity around open APIs and ecosystems, digital ecosystems, for me, that's an interesting example. I don't see a lot of traditional companies being as aggressive. Why? Why? Because I think, first of all, there's a little bit of schizophrenia happening within our own organizations where we invest in creating APIs, open APIs, so we're opening the doors, basically, to our data systems and business processes. But on the other hand, our business leaders are still siloed in their mindset. They don't have this collaborative nature, either internally, we talk about this with the CMO-CRO relationship, but even less so externally. And because they have this inside-out type of approach, they only see their own silo and their own business. They don't really see how they can assemble this ecosystem of players. The other thing is that understanding truly what customers want and having this customer-obsessed mindset, which is still lacking, and coming back from the survey that we did in Singapore, that's one of the areas where organizations need to be improving their capabilities. So the prediction for 2018 and beyond is that we'll still hear a lot of companies talk about open APIs. We'll see a lot of companies launching their catalog or application developer platforms. But we think that organizations, because they fail to gain the trust and the permission to innovate at the adjacent possible, will become unintended utilities. And what I mean by that is that you think about the telecom industry and this idea that the fear that telecom service providers fear to become the dump pipe in the back end and losing the relationship with the customer, that's we think will happen over the next couple of years as these organizations fail to gain permission from their customers to be able to innovate and extend the value proposition to cover a broader set of desires within their digital ecosystem of value. So, not everything is lost. Obviously, we want to provide a few recommendations. First of all, it's about understanding the customer. That's probably, as you can imagine, the most important thing, understanding the customer's ecosystem. What are some of the pain points that these customers are facing in these ecosystems, and how can your organization actually solve some of these pain points that might be related to your business or adjacent to your business as well. Understand whether or not you can gain permission. Are you the power cog in this ecosystem? Right? Do you have the legitimacy to create this additional value for your customers? Right? And then culture. What's your collaboration culture, internally and externally? That's going back to what we were discussing earlier, and something that needs to be encouraged, something that needs to be incentivized internally within all of our organizations. And that's another thing in terms of skills, and also closing the loop on some of the things that I was telling you about in the talent space. Design thinking has been in everybody's mind for quite a number of years now. I mean, obviously these are extremely important skills to be able to develop within your organization, to be able to connect with the true needs and desires of your customers. I think this set of skills will have to be complemented with system thinking in order to get this broad view, this broad understanding of the ecosystem. And when you think about it, this kind of choreographers, these are not skills that we have within our own organization, and that's something that we will have to develop over the next few years as well. With that, I think we can move to the Q&A.
Yeah, I think we'll bypass it.
Oh, okay.
We're a bit short of time. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the panel right away. So thank you very much, analysts, for your presentations. Thank you. I'll let you introduce the panelists.
So, Julien Fay from Accent Telematics, your VP Automotive and Transportation. Aki Ramin from Bamboo, VP Global Advisor. Thank you guys for joining. So I was wondering. Great question.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for
Thank you.
what I thought we would do to close this prediction event is to invite a couple of true innovators, startups that are working with clients here in Singapore to help them transform the business, and also leveraging emerging technologies like telematics and artificial intelligence and global advisors. So maybe if you can just in a couple of minutes introduce your organizations and what you do.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. So basically, I'm the vice president of Waxel Telematics, and Waxel actually develops an IoT platform just to improve the customer engagement. So we use like deep tech, we use deep knowledge on the user, on the driver, like most of the time, just to understand his behavior, his habit, and predict using machine learning system the next step and how to target him in marketing, Right.
Hello everyone, my name is Aki from Bamboo. Bamboo does robo-advisory, which if you've never heard the term is simply online saving investing. So rather than walking to the bank branch or meeting with a financial advisor, you do it online. But really what we're trying to do there is more like the Netflix of investing and saving your financial life basically. Rather than have to think about what do I need and when, and can we just bring you the right products contextually as you're going about your life and making sure that you're covered on all bases, whether that's your savings or your retirement or insurance. So that's what we do.
Great, thanks a lot for that. So Aki, I'll ask you about some of the things that you're seeing in the market and maybe some of your predictions for 2018. But before that, I wanted to get a sense of the the robo-advisor landscape in the region, and I was in Thailand just a few weeks ago, and this kind of frenzy, digital frenzy and robo-advisor frenzy. Every single bank wants to be the first one to launch a robo-advisor in Thailand. Can you give us a sense of the status in that particular space?
Sure. I guess robo-advisory is a little bit invisible to most consumers at this point. It doesn't feel like it's maybe something that people are thinking about on a daily basis. I wish I had a robo-advisor that I could access. But if you look at it from a business and industry point of view, it's probably one of the biggest digital transformations out there that's happening right now, because by definition, wealth management is managing the world's money. That's a lot of money, because it's all the money, right? And what's happening there is really it's transforming from a human-led, paper-led, slow process to a fully automated digital process. So if you think of the implications, they're pretty far-reaching and significant, even I'd say on an economic level and in terms of affecting industries and jobs. So I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be much more prevalent and kind of visible even within consumers.
Yeah, it's true. I was looking at some of the data that we collect from consumers across the region, and less than 2% of consumers in Asia Pacific use robo-advisors, so it's still emerging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the predictions are that robo-advisory globally is heading towards something like 2 trillion assets under management, which sounds like a big number, but then again, if all of the money in the world is, say, 250 trillion, there's still a long ways to go, but if you look at the sort of growth, it's exponential. And by definition of digital transformation, it's unless there's some sort of World War III scenario, it's pretty clear that it's never going to be less digital. It's always going to be more digital. So I think a lot of people will have very rude awakenings to that sort of the pace of transformation.
And do you see any particular customer segments? I mean, are banks thinking about millennials when they think about robo-advisor? Or?
Oh, that's the obvious place to start, but I think, to be honest, it's really across the board. We work with private banks, like Standard Chartered Private Bank, but we also work with insurance companies who are targeting low-income families. I think the biggest, of course, impact that we can have is how do we get people saving and investing who don't think they qualify to save and invest, right? So like, oh, I can barely afford to pay off my credit card each month. How do we get those people to actually think about their long-term needs and goals, whether it's putting your kid to college or saving for a kind of comfortable retirement? How do we move people from spending behaviors to saving and investing behaviors? So that's really what gets us more fired up, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Julien, so you work quite a bit with insurance companies in the region.
Yes.
Helping them, getting more data from vehicles, for instance. So can you give us an idea of the state of maturity of these discussions, and how do you see insurance companies willing to transform themselves with this data to create new type of products?
So basically for insurance, we came from a very traditional model where everyone was using papers and like standardized this definition for differentiating people. We're using like the telematics, for example, and you can actually contextualize and pinpoint every specific for each driver. That's a trend that we see in South Asia, which is growing. But more and more actually is everyone drives differently. Everyone is potentially entitled to a different premium. So when we work with insurance in the region, we try to help them adjust and flush out all the bad drivers, for example. Because then at the end of the day, they need to have a good combined ratio. They need to save on costs and to increase the revenue. So by differentiating drivers, you can actually just retain the one you are interested in. And so that's what we do.
So, but do you see them from a maturity perspective? When you engage with them, having the right mindset. Especially, I'm also interested in to what extent they really obsess about the customer and design from customer first point of view as opposed to designing from a technology. Because you bring the technology, you bring the technology platform, the Bamboo on yourself.
This is actually why at some point you're mentioning ecosystem and data privacy, and actually it starts everything from the ecosystem and the data privacy, because you have to give a clear value for the user. You know, we track them, so you know we are like a big browser and they don't like us. So we need to balance and give value, you know, for compensate. So the clear example for insurance is discount. So if I track you, potentially at the end of the testing assessment, you could actually get like a discount on the premium. So that's one the key. Another lever that actually insurance are using is developing this ecosystem with multiple like partners. So it could be like a voucher, like gamification, rewarding, just to engage them. Because the big difference between fintech and insurtech is fintech, I check my bank app almost every day, every week. Yeah. Insurtech, you don't check your insurance. The perceived value.
So how do you create engagement?
Gamification, challenges. How do you compare yourself to everyone else? How do you see yourself? Because you know, I'm sure you've done tons of study, but we did like a couple of studies a couple of years ago, and we saw that actually 85% of people think they're a good driver. It's very few people thinking that they're a bad driver. So once you compare yourself to everyone else, you know, you see the difference and you see the improvement you can gain. So
I also wanted to open up for questions from the audience.
Yeah, we just said about trust, and from Australia, financial advisors rate down their real estate agents and use trust. So, what's your comments on people trusting something that's automated and robotized versus a financial agent? They can at least look and see who may, you know, be incented by commissions and so on. The robot's invisible commission.
Sure, sure. So it depends on, of course, how you apply technology. But I think that the great promise of automation is to make processes transparent. So the downside of a human relationship is sort of like, it's really almost impossible to gauge whether the financial advisor, or really any counterparty, is actually on your side, or they're just kind of telling you what you want to hear. And unfortunately, in most cases, let's say in financial services, it's pretty clear actually that they are not on your side. So I think that's, you know, what we were trying to do is like, how can we turn that into something that's transparent, so you understand, you know, what is the basis of whatever recommendation we're giving you, and really sort of give you the flexibility of different options. I think people don't generally like sort of being pushed in any direction. You want to sort of give them the lay of the land, and then let them make an informed decision.
So one thing, just to add on that made me think about one of the predictions that we had around, you know, Xiaofeng talked about 10% of the purchasing decision will be influenced by agents in 2018. We think that in most cases, customers will know that this is an agent, that this is a robot, right? Or this is software AI keys. But that goes back to this trust, meaning that if you don't have the escalation processes, for instance, if the bot or the agent is stuck in a particular loop, and if you don't have the escalation processes quickly and seamlessly to have a human person, that's going to matter from a trust perspective. And that's a big risk for clients as well, that we haven't talked about, but we see that as something that is kind of risky. Any other questions?
What is the role of GDPR in what we're looking at in Singapore?
Do you have any GDPR?
With regard to the last presentation, even following up with this, GDPR will, any companies in Singapore that are working with European businesses will need to comply in some manner or the other. I mean, if you can afford a 20 million euro fine, then ignore what I'm saying. Otherwise, this is something that need to be looking at.
Yeah, so I think we haven't really looked at GDPR in detail. The prediction that we have at Forrester is that 80% of companies will not be ready by May 2018, which is the date when GDPR will become in action. I think the key, you know, I think that what's going to happen though is that one of the most important elements of this regulation is the ability to, within 72 hours, comment and disclose what happened to the data and what are some of the remediation capabilities. So I'm thinking that even though companies are not ready, they will be forced to be much more transparent with what's happening. So, because I think what the European regulator wants to avoid, among other things, is the Uber situation or the Equifax situation, where you get to know about what happened a year and a half later, and that's not acceptable anymore. So yeah, I think it's that's how I see things.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I think the reason regulation is so difficult, especially in financial services, is because the result of whether you're compliant or not is largely in the hands of thousands or tens of thousands of humans, right? So there's a lot of mistakes in interpretation. You have to train people every single year. You have to test them for compliance, and really, it's almost impossible to measure. So I think that's one of the big benefits of automation. You just build the regulations in there. In fact, there's a lot of interesting startups who are offering, let's say, regulations as APIs, right? So you just build the rules into your system, off you go. It doesn't make a mistake because it's the only way it knows how to make those transactions is in a compliant way. So it kind of reduces, I think, overall in the future, this kind of eternal headache of regulation.
So it's almost like you remove the human factor, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a few minutes. Feel free to, please, sorry.
I'm interested in the last slide you showed just before the panel discussion started, where you showed Alibaba and the whole ecosystem that they're building. So my question is that what Alibaba has managed to do, no company will be able to do in a functioning democracy. I mean, they have lots of impact.
I knew I would get these questions.
So my point is, I guess the whole environment is changing, and I guess as digital information gets more democratized, lots of controls and things will come into place. So what would be your view in terms of how this will play out, right? Let's assume that those advantages are not going to be there. So what are going to be the biggest challenges? I don't know whether the question is right, but my point is, how do you then survive in this new environment where information is where consumers are going to take back more and more of the information? And they're going to say, look, you can't have this free information to use anymore.
So, I mean, one point is around, how replicable these models in China are outside of China, which and I think you're right. This is a big question. On the other end, I see similar type of, if you look at Gojek, for instance, in Indonesia, they are moving in the same direction, try to replicate that, but in a different way in terms of how they protect, not protect, how they disclose and use customer-related data. You have an interesting company here in Singapore as well called MetaDoctor, MetaDR, which is creating this healthcare ecosystem as well. So obviously the approaches are going to vary depending on the culture, depending on the sensitivity of customers sharing data and agreeing to have somebody else get access and use that data. But I think the direction is similar.
If I can add something, on the last slide, when you saw all the health ecosystem designed by Alibaba, I think this can be replicated everywhere. For a simple reason, the value proposition. It's health information is very sensitive. I don't want to share that diabetes, I don't want to share cancer to anybody. But if actually I get a clear value from free screening, better coverage for my insurance, then Alibaba actually found the right thing, because a couple of years ago at PICC in China did the same thing with Vital Health, I think. Mm-hmm. And after 8 months, they had almost 80 million subscribers sharing the information. It's just a matter of opting, because if you think as a customer that you can control of your data, then it's fine, and it doesn't really apply to China. It can also apply to Europe or to US. Really, the benefit is really, really important point.
So the value equation will vary depending on the country, but I think that the architecture, this digital ecosystem architecture and model, I think is what we're going to see a lot more. We have also Tom and Xiaofeng and Charlie. If you have, we have maybe time for one more question. If you want to ask them about blockchain or.
You said earlier that one person, or the CMO, will assume the single point of responsibility for the entire customer experience.
Yeah.
Why the CMO? Why not head of sales? Why not head of service?
Because we think that, and Shafan can respond to that, but then maybe I'll give you my thoughts. We think that this is the executive that is the most customer obsessed and needs to take part of take that responsibility. Right, and right now they are focusing on customer acquisition, and we see them being able to extend. For me, it's a how do you enable this end-to-end relationship support or end-to-end marketing support, which means that every step of the way you have the brand promise that being inserted at every interaction point. Thanks for coming. Being acquisition, sales, onboarding, customer service, and so on. And that's where the brand strategy aligned to the customer experience and being able to replicate that across the point of interactions.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Do CEOs in Asia Pacific, very often you don't have a CMO, you have a marketing function, maybe a couple levels lower, share that same view. What was your experience with?
Well, it's still early stage. If you look at Prudential, for instance, they are moving in that direction right now, where the chief marketing officer is now chief customer officer, and we're writing a case study on this particular company, and the marketing, the different head of customer segments who own the P&L will report into Angela Hunter in that particular case. So maybe I wanted to come back to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. One prediction for 2018?
Impeachment.
No prediction for 2018. In terms of big data, we're gonna, I think we're gonna encounter a change of mindsets because especially about regulation, data privacy, actually more and more companies are gonna use blockchain, different ideas just to make sure about the data integrity. So that's gonna be one of the trends actually you mentioned, but for me it's the key one for 2018.
Okay.
A few thoughts related to AI. I think one, since we used the Alibaba example here pretty extensively, I think 2018 will see the sort of emergence of Alibaba, but a few of these Chinese players, including Tencent, into Southeast Asia. For example, in Malaysia, huge adoption of WeChat there. They're going to move in with WePay. And even Singapore, you're seeing kind of now this adoption of the national QR code payment standard. So this is going to pave the way for these giants to come out stomping into Southeast Asia. So I think next year will be like a very critical junction. Is that a huge, overwhelming success and paving the way for global domination, or is it not as easy as they assumed to replicate that model outside of China? I think the other thing I would mention is within finance, which is just that you will see a lot of non-financial players enter the space. So, for example, right now, Grab is also moving into payments. Now they have the Grab wallet. They're putting up QR codes all across Singapore. So they want to effectively become an Alibaba equivalent, right? You start from one business model where you're able to raise massive amounts of capital, and you start leveraging that into all sorts of different fields because you can, not because you should, because you can.
And you have the permission from your customer.
Yeah, or I guess in some ways, if you think of the Uber strategy, you don't ask for permission, you make your own permission. And what's interesting about it is, even when you come into financial services, everybody here is scared of regulations, talk about that. They're just obsessing about the customer. How can they help the customer? They worry about that, and they assume that all the consequences are going to work itself out. And it's a very bold strategy, but if nobody else is doing that, it's hard to beat them, right?
Exactly. Guys, thanks a lot for this great presentation. Pass it over to Farhad, who will say a couple of closing comments. Thanks again, guys, for coming.